There you go. So welcome everyone, and Brian, why don't you share who you are, and then let's go around the group and just introduce ourselves. So Brian, do you want to share who you are?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. Brian Cook. I am serving as a senior pastor in Kokomo at Grace Church right downtown.
And Brian will be the one really that we're going to turn this over to today, and he's agreed to share his church's experience with Fresh Expressions, and in particular, how they have moved from a more of an attractional church to one that's more of a church that is going out, connecting with people outside the walls. So we look forward to that. And Brian has really agreed to help spearhead our Fresh Expression movement. I call it a movement in Indiana. So he'll be working with us in the future, and I look forward to that. So why don't we just go around and share our names and what church we're with and where we're located. I'm in Fort Wayne, Brian is in Kokomo, and Brenda, you're in Indianapolis. And then just a little bit about how Fresh Expressions is a part of your ministry or interest, and then we'll move on to have Brian share. So I'm going to just pick some people here. Is it Candace, is it? No,
it's Carolyn.
Carolyn, why don't you go ahead?
Okay, I'm here. I'm from Chapel Hill Church, and I am co-chair of the mission committee, and we are interested because we are working with several apartment complexes nearby and want to see how we can interact differently.
That's great. And Brenda, you're from that church, and is there a third person from Chapel Hill on the call right now?
Yep, Pastor Dave's on there.
Oh yeah, Dave. Okay, you want to share, Pastor Dave?
My name is Dave Buckner. I'm here because Brenda made me be here, and because she's on the conference staff, and I have to do what she tells me to do. So, been here for a couple of years, and I look forward to hearing what you're going to hear from Carolyn about what's going on here in the church. And we got a few things that I think are probably Fresh Expressions worthy, but just trying to learn a little bit more.
Great. Good to have you on the call. Barb Holcomb, good to see you. You want to share?
Sure. I'm from Plymouth Trinity. And is Jessica echoing?
I think so. Just mute Jessica.
So Jessica and I are in the same room. So Jessica just muted her. So Jessica and I work together at Trinity on missions and missional opportunities, and we're really new to Fresh Expressions. So I pulled her in today so that we can hear what Fresh Expressions is about, because I think we do it, but we need to do it better. And so we're in the learning process right now.
That's great. I think we all are, actually. So thank you, Barbara. How about Jessica? Go ahead, and if you want to share a little bit more about yourself and your.
I am, like Barb said, at Trinity UMC in Plymouth, working with Barb. I'm kind of the new chair of our COM committee, which is Council on Ministries, so outreach focus, and I'm sort of taking over for Barb, who was in charge of that in the past. So we're working together right now. So I'm pretty new to this, but we work with a trailer park in town pretty regularly. And so we're interested in how we can reach out to those people.
That's great. Thanks. How about you, Dee? Why don't you go ahead and share?
Hi, I'm Dee Cazares. I'm from Bethel United Methodist Church in Pike Township. And we have just recently put together a new vision for our church. And it's so new that I had to write it down. We are cultivating the spiritual life of an inclusive community. We're connecting with a more diverse community, and we are creating a missional movement within that community.
Oh.
And that is a result of going through the impact session process with Glenn Howe, which was very informative for us. And out of all that, I have now I've transformed from the missions chairman to a new position called impact director.
Oh, that's
Sandy Crawhiger referred me to this Zoom meeting and said that she thought it'd be good for me to sit in and hear all about it. So I'm excited about this.
That's great. Welcome, Dee.
Thank you.
Yeah. Ron, how about you? Good to see you.
Good to see you. Ron Marcoux, I'm a pastor at Scipio United Methodist Church and Reuter Chapel United Methodist Church. We have a fresh expression going in each of those. It probably one or two going on at Scipio that could be loosely defined. I have a very keen interest in fresh expressions. My seminary learning taught me about post-Christian culture. And then as fresh expressions movement came, I've endeavored to be active here in the Southeast and go to everything that I can as my schedule allows. Great to be here.
Yeah, I'm glad you're here, and I love your passion, Ron. Jolita?
My name is Yolita Urbali.
Oh, I apologize.
That's okay. That's normal. That's how all American, when they see Jay, that's all they all think is Joe. So I'm used to it. So it's okay. But my name is Yolita Urbali, and I'm serving here as a pastor at Fairline United Methodist Church. Fairline New Life United Methodist Church.
And where's
Fairline?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, between the cornfields.
Okay.
It's where the Shelbyville is, kind
Okay.
of Shelby County. So in that area. And so I have heard a lot about Fresh Expression. I have planned, I think, for probably around a year to come to attend, but it never worked for my schedule for some reason. So I was kind of happy last minute that I was able to jump in that Zoom meeting and just want to learn. I always look for some fresh ways, and I always think it's good to keep looking for new ways, new doors, new hearts. So anyway, I'm excited to learn.
Good to have you here. Great. How about you, Kristen?
Yeah, hi, I'm Kristen Marble, and I'm the lead pastor at Westmore Street Free Methodist Church. So I'm one of your sisters. I grew up United Methodist, but now serve Free Methodist Church in urban Indianapolis. And this is beginning year 4 at this church. I was brought in to be kind of the turnaround pastor. So historically, the church was very healthy and large, and just has been on a steady decline for decades. And so during this COVID time, I've really been digging in quite strongly to Fresh Expressions, and just kind of thinking through and trying to bring my board through rethinking how we can shift our culture from this really attractional, I just provide religious goods and services for you all, you just come and receive and then go away, to a missional, priesthood of all believers, where everybody is actively involved in serving and being a disciple that makes disciples. So just trying to think through about like blended ecologies and what that would look like to do a both and. I brought a proposal to my board last week, and they look like deer in the headlights, because I actually suggested doing an every other week where we would gather in large groups, and then the other week we would gather in small house churches, and then we'd gather back together in large groups. And I think I really scared them, but they've been praying for this week for us to meet again tonight. So just trying to inform myself and learn and grow and use that to help lead better.
That's great. That's great. Well, welcome. And how about you, Emily?
Yeah, I'm working at the Delphi UMC Church as the discipleship intern for this summer. And we are, I would say, very new to Fresh Expressions. I think we're trying to explore the house church option, just as a way to transition before going back into the large group sanctuary setting. So yeah.
Very good. Thank you. And you just finished your school semester, right? And you graduated or not yet?
3 semesters left. I'm a junior.
There you go. All right. And Melissa, how about you?
Hi, I'm Melissa Grundle. I'm Albright up in Mishawaka. And I'm multitasking right now, so I don't have my video on because I'm being at home with my kiddos. So right now I'm the Family Ministries Director at Albright, and I'm also on our empowerment team, which is kind of basically our missions committee. And we've been working towards becoming a missionally focused church for a few years now. And we have a partnership with a local elementary school right now that we're trying to look for more ways to do outreach and to work different ways to offer worship experiences. So thank you for that.
Great. Well, good having you with us, all of you. Let's open with a word of prayer, and then I'll turn it over to Brian, and he will share. Lord Jesus, I thank you for this group that's gathered on this afternoon and has given up this time in their day to focus on the fresh expression model of ministry. And we're so thankful that we have someone like Brian who can come and share how it has impacted his own ministry and his church in Kokomo. We do pray for those outside our churches who are, especially those who are unlikely to come on a Sunday morning, to be attracted to our ministries in the normal way that we do them. And so we just pray that you would help us figure out how through this model or some other model that we might reach even them with the good news, your good news. And we pray this all in your name, Jesus. Amen. All right, Brian.
Wow, I'm incredibly humbled to be here in this group, hearing some of your introductions and stories. Some of you may be way further ahead in this fresh expressions game than we are, but I thank you, Ed, for the opportunity to come and share. I've been here at Grace Church since 2012, so we're finishing up our 8th year here at Grace. And when I arrived back in 2012, I spent probably the first year, as most of us do in new context, just getting to know not only the people, but the environment and our community. And Grace Church is the oldest church in Kokomo. We just celebrated our 175th year in ministry. So when Kokomo was being settled right over here on the Wildcat Creek, the family that was settling Kokomo actually started this church. And so it goes all the way back to the circuit riders, and it has this long, beautiful history here in Kokomo. But that history and that heritage had really created an identity that I'm not sure that this church really wanted to go. It just kind of stuck with them. And this church, as I ventured out in the community and was getting to know the people, one of the things I discovered was this was truly the country club church here in Kokomo, as probably many of you may serve or have served in the past. And I mean, it wasn't just a few people. It was just about everybody I talked to that weren't even connected to this church. Many of the people I talked to said, oh yeah, that's the money church. That's the church where all the attorneys, all the doctors, it's the country club church. And one of the things that I soon discovered here was that at the country club church, people are really here just to show up and make an appearance, and they weren't really here to be vulnerable. You don't show up to the country club to let folks know that your family is in trouble, your marriage is in trouble, your job's in trouble. You just show up. And that became a lot of our ministry here. People just showing up, and if there were ministry needs, a lot of it was hired. They would hire the hands to go and do the work and didn't really invest in it themselves. But there's just great history, an incredible church. This congregation used to worship probably close to 600 in a Sunday morning worship. Our average worship attendance is now about 240. So we have experienced that steady decline as many churches in the attractional model have. So I spent a lot of my time just getting to know and figuring out who we were. And one of the things that I have been guilty of, I've been in ministry for 32 years, And one of the things that I have often been guilty of in ministry is going to seminars and conferences and purchasing the box and bringing it back home and just trying to unpack the box that I just discovered. And I got really tired of that. I got tired of that model. I got tired of coming home from a conference and unpacking a box that was never going to work in my context, and then growing frustrated because it didn't work. And so I spent a lot of time in this ministry context working on me. And so while I was working on me, the church was also working on their own ministry and their own identity as well. So I went to work on developing my own leadership skills. I started work in a doctoral program up at Garrett Evangelical Theological Seminary up in Chicago. I was really interested in missional renewal. I thought it would be a perfect study here in this historic church. How do we transform not only our identity and our ministry identity, but our culture as well? How do we transform that? And so I jumped into the whole study of the missional church theology and all that went with it, and immersed myself in some of the great minds of the missional movement. And during that, I also jumped into some of the other things that were offered through the conference. I jumped into Spiritual Leadership Incorporated out of Lexington, Kentucky. Maybe some of you have done some of that. While all of this was going on, I stumbled on to Fresh Expressions through the conference and some of the offerings, some of the trainings that they were offering. And really found what I feel was part of my ministry DNA. It's really where my heart has kind of lined up for probably the past 10 years, but I didn't really know how to describe it or what it was that was stirring in my heart. And so while all of that was taking place personally for me, my own leadership transformation, this church was also going through some transformation. We jumped in on the Fruitful Congregations journey. We started that, I don't remember the exact year, probably 2014. And that was a group of leadership that were half reluctant and half of them were excited about jumping into Fruitful Congregations. But the beauty of that journey was it began to cultivate a new identity for this congregation. They began to look at themselves in a mirror and realize that what they were seeing was not who they wanted to be. They were discovering that the context of this church was not the context of our ministry location. Where Grace Church sits, we're right downtown. We're a block and a half away from the courthouse. Our context is homelessness. We have a lot of folks dealing with addiction issues, mental health concerns, homelessness, poverty issues. But that was not the context of our ministry, of our church. And what's really been really fun to watch happen is on any given Sunday now, when our church doors are open, we have folks from doctors, attorneys, business owners, to those who are homeless, dealing with some of the challenges of life, sitting in the same pew. And that was not the church when I first got here. So this church, we have made some incredible strides, and God has really stirred in some amazing ways. So while I was changing, the church was changing through Fruitful Congregations. The ministry structure was changing. We went to one board structure through Fruitful Congregations. All of that started creating this vacuum of people and leadership beginning to dream some new missional dreams, some new missional hopes, and some new ideas. And it's really become a really exciting, fun place to be. I spent the first 25 years of my ministry working in the attractional model. And like I said, I'd go to a conference, I'd pull back a box, and I would hope it would work. And for me, when it came to the why of Fresh Expressions, quite honestly, I got tired of the attractional model. I got tired of the competitive nature of church. I got really frustrated with trying to compete with the best worship experience or the best youth program or the best children's program. Not that those aren't important, but it felt like that we were spending all of our time, all of our energy with the institutional church on just trying to attract all the folks to come to us. And my heart began to bend in a different way. And my heart began to bend towards the idea that we truly are a sent group of people. And while the church is a beautiful place, I love the inherited church and this existing church that is here in downtown Kokomo. I truly believe God was calling us to move outside this building and outside these walls. So for me, that's kind of where I came to the why for me of Fresh Expressions. I just got tired. I got tired of running that routine of 25 years of trying to compete in that world of Christianity. So, and also for me, I was discovering that we were moving into a new era of Christianity. We were moving into, as Ron, I think, mentioned in his introduction in his studies, we're moving into a new era, a post-Christian era. And, I was discovering that 25 years of ministry and all the things I had been doing, they just weren't working anymore. We were moving into a culture and a time where people were growing less interested in the church. We are seeing a culture and a context where our younger generation is less and less attracted to the church. And that was most of the language I heard here when I arrived. A congregation that with an average age of 70 was always saying, we got to get younger, we got to get younger. And the reality is our younger generation is not that interested in the Leave It to Beaver ministry context that we've created here at Grace Church. And that younger generation is now living in this modern family era, and this church was still stuck in Leave It to Beaver. And so everything that they were doing and trying, it wasn't working as the attractional model. And so that was the why for me. It also became some of the why for this church on why we should look and do something different. The attractional model we were discovering was losing ground. When you look at the generations, a third of millennials and younger were not affiliated with the church. I think that statistic may even be higher. Those were some of the numbers I heard through Fresh Expressions and some of the other seminars, but I think it may be higher than a third of our attractional generation is not interested in the church. 40%, I was hearing, and our church was hearing, that 40% of that generation aren't just going to walk through the door. They're just not going to come in uninvited or connected in some way. They're just not going to wander in. And that began to break not only my heart, but the heart of this church. And so we began to experience some new things, some new moving here in this church. And it's been really, really a God thing, quite honestly. I think what grabbed my excitement and my passion with Fresh Expressions is this whole idea of taking the church that Jesus loves and putting it closer to the people that Jesus loves. And, we had that model all backwards here at Grace Church. We were trying to create this place that would attract all the people that Jesus loved. And, we have this beautiful building here, this historic building with great people here and great things happening. And we were just hoping that by opening the doors, folks would come wandering in. In fact, I heard that was a lot of the message here at Grace Church from some of our longtime members. Was people would say, we are the oldest church in Kokomo. People know that we're here, and people ought to just wander in. We shouldn't have to do a whole lot to get people to come in. And so my heart was turning, the church's heart was turning. This missional movement was reminding me, was reminding this congregation that we truly are a sent people. And in the process of rediscovering my identity in ministry, and also this congregation rediscovering their identity, we went through a pastoral change. In 2012, I was brought in as the associate pastor. There was no plan in place for me to take over as the senior pastor. We all had the understanding that after I finished up my educational work and my years here, that we would probably be reappointed and transferred into a new ministry context. It was probably 5 years into our ministry here, as we were finishing up our Fruitful Congregations journey, our leadership team asked the question to our conference superintendent, why are we doing all of this Fruitful Congregations if our senior pastor is going to be retiring and our associate pastor is going to be moved on to a new appointment? And so they put together through Bishop Coiner and the cabinet and the leadership team, they put together a succession plan asking me to stick around and help lead into this new missional identity. And part of the agreement was in staying here was the understanding that this church wasn't going to stay where they always had been. I said I would be happy to stay if they were willing to look at this church as a church restart. And they agreed. And so that's where we have spent our last probably 3 or 4 years in this whole process of just restarting and re-exploring who we are as a United Methodist Church in this context. And so we implemented a team-based ministry. This is really where it all started for us. We really started focusing on creating team-based ministry here. We found the people that God was stirring in an incredible way. We found people that God was speaking to here, that God was planting ministry seeds in, and we began to open doors and invite them to jump in and take some of their passions and their excitement and begin to explore what that ministry looks like. We also started finding as the Fresh Expressions teach, you'll hear language along the lines of people of peace, and you'll hear them talk about pioneer pastors, and we just started identifying those people in our context. And once we started identifying the people of peace and some of those pioneer pastors, we were pleasantly surprised at what God was beginning to stir here at Grace Church. And then we just started fanning the flame. We just got out of their way and we just started fanning the flames of excitement and possibility. And some of these people just took off running. We empowered them, and the church really became a place to reimagine what church could look like. And so I say all of that, I share all of that story to simply say this has been a journey for us. It's been a journey for me personally. It's been a journey for this congregation. I had to move away from this expectation that everything was going to happen quickly, and really grab a hold of this as truly a journey for us. We have developed a Fresh Expressions team here at Grace Church. Part of our ministry operational team, we also have this Fresh Expressions team. We started that team by connecting them to everything Fresh Expressions that we could find, whether it was in the conference, whether it was in some other state. We have taken more trips and we have connected through more Zoom meetings than I ever thought would happen. But our people got excited and they jumped in. We've had people go to the dinner church teachings. We've had some of our folks attend the Fresh Expression Days, just exploring Fresh Expression. So we've been a lot of different places. We also connected our team not only to the training, but we became real intentional in creating a prayer focus and a prayer ministry with our Fresh Expressions team. Everything that we do, everything that we started doing, we just covered it in prayer. We have done a lot of prayer walks through this neighborhood, around this church, among the people who were not part of Grace Church. We just immersed ourselves in this neighborhood, spending a lot of time with prayer walks, listening groups. We have connected with a lot of the folks who were outside of our church walls, those who were homeless, those who were dealing with some of the struggles of poverty, those who were dealing with the struggles of mental health challenges, addictions. We sat around tables with all of them and had conversations. And we have been incredibly surprised on how God has stirred in those conversations, and how folks who we didn't even have relationships with began to lead us in the direction of Fresh Expressions. And so we started putting together some organic expressions that really just began to fit our context and our passions. And I'll share with you that some of our Fresh Expressions have failed, which were great learning experiences for us. We have many that are some wonderful expressions of ministry right now. We took some of our existing ministries. I heard some of you talk about some of the existing ministries that you're identifying now as Fresh Expressions. We did that. We tweaked many of our existing ministries and began to talk about how could they become Fresh Expressions. So we didn't have to recreate the wheel on a lot of these things, but we just had to change some of our mindset and some of the way we thought about these. So a couple of our existing, right now we have, I don't know, probably 10 or 12 Fresh Expressions. 2 of them were existing ministries that we tweaked. One of them was a ministry called Hands of Grace. This is a monthly meal, a dinner, which is becoming really a dinner church model for us. But it was a monthly meal that we shared with our homeless community downtown. And we would open up, this ministry actually started with 2 women in our community who heard that there were people living under a bridge here in Kokomo. And they didn't believe it. They were like, there's no way that's happening in Kokomo. And so they took a field trip one day and they discovered the people living under a bridge here in Kokomo. And they started feeding those individuals, building relationships with them, connecting with them in an incredible way. And they fed and built relationships with them for the first 3 years outside. Never did they venture indoors. So if it was raining or snowing or sleeting, they fed that community outdoors. And after 3 years, they came to me. I just really arrived here at Grace Church. They came and they were looking for a place to host that meal. And I said, absolutely, you can use our church. We've got a great fellowship hall, great kitchen. Come on in and start using our facility. And so out of that relationship and out of that journey, we are now beginning to host this as a dinner church. We've moved from just feeding people and offering a place for people to come and eat. Not that that's not important, but there was a deep desire to connect with people on a spiritual level. And we just began exploring discipleship with that group. And we will feed anywhere from 150 to just over 200 people in that meal. And when we started offering an opportunity to explore discipleship with that group, we were surprised that about 50 people stuck around for a worship experience out of that group. And again, that was just some folks gathered around who began asking, what if we tweaked this ministry just a little bit? Could it become a Fresh Expression, connecting with people on a spiritual level? And it has blossomed. It's an incredible experience. That was one ministry that we just tweaked. Another one is a ministry called Added Grace. And this is a ministry that meets once a month. It's our senior adult ministry that gathers together for a meal. And it's shocking how many times we gather for ministry around meals. And it's beautiful how that relates biblically and theologically to who we are. But our Added Grace is our senior adult ministry that gathers around tables once a month. And they would primarily gather just to fellowship and eat together. And we began having conversations with them about what if this became an extension of who you are as a Fresh Expressions into some of our nursing homes here in Kokomo. So that's a ministry that is just starting. That Fresh Expression is just beginning to take root, as we've got some folks from the Added Grace are beginning to say, yes, what if we take this into the nursing homes and go and engage there? I don't know what will come of that, but it's just one of those conversations of us saying, what is something we already have in our hand? What ministry do we already have in our hand that we can tweak? We have several other ministries that are happening here, Fresh Expressions, meeting with our downtown neighborhood, those who are living in homelessness and poverty, sitting around tables with them. We have created a couple Fresh Expressions that were suggestions by them. We've created a coffee house. So many of our people here at Grace Church, when they gather for meetings, they're meeting at Starbucks, they're meeting at Panera Bread. We have another local coffee house called Big Ben's. And a lot of our folks were meeting there, but the individuals from our homeless community, they can't go there. They don't have the means, the finances to go to Starbucks. And they said they would love to have a place that they could come and build community. And so we had a space, a community building here with our church that we opened up 2 times a week. And it's just it's a coffee house for our homeless folks to come in and charge a cell phone, grab a cup of coffee, free cup of coffee or a cup of tea or hot chocolate in the winter, a bottled water. We have folks from the community who will bring in refreshments to share with our community. We had a local donut shop that at the end of their day, whatever donuts were left, they would drop them off here at the coffee house for our folks. So it was a way to not only connect with our neighborhood, those living in some of those challenging situations, but we were also able to connect with some of our neighborhood businesses who were interested in engaging with that part of the community. So the coffee house, we've actually had to shut the doors with COVID. We were discovering that a lot in our homeless community had no idea that COVID-19 was even in our ranks. So our first couple weeks, we were able to use it as a place to teach and educate what was going on in our world at that time. So we're hoping to here in the next week or two to be able to reopen the coffee house. Another Fresh Expression that kicked off out of having conversations with our neighbors was we started a bike shop. And it's a nonprofit bike shop. So we are getting bikes from that are basically trashed bikes that they're throwing them away and they're dropping them off here at our bike shop. And we've got a gentleman who manages our bike shop who comes in and takes all of these second, third, fourth hand bikes and repairs them, pours love into them. And then with our neighborhood, those folks that are basically walking everywhere they go, we're able to sell bikes to them, for a minimum cost of $5, $10. It just depends on what the folks can afford. We decided to sell them to make sure that they had skin in the game. And that came from our neighbors who suggested that. They said, don't just give all these bikes away because they'll end up down in the creek or they'll end up in a dumpster. They said, make sure that, people have skin in the game. So, and we've got folks that come in and they'll air up their tires. They'll stop by the bike shop for a cup of coffee, a place to build relationship. And again, I don't know where that's going to go. I don't know if we'll be able to form anything, discipleship and spiritual formation out of that. But we're walking through the process of exploring what may come of that fresh expression, or if it'll even turn into a fresh expression. We also have a ministry called Rainbow of Life, which started with one of our people of peace who she worked as an accountant, and her heart was being stirred by God. Her and her husband had suffered loss in their family. They had lost a child. It was actually a twin, so they birthed one of their children. They lost one. And her heart ached in such a way that a fresh expression ministry came out of that called Rainbow of Life Ministries. And so she meets on a weekly basis with women in grief, gathering families together who have suffered loss, and they walk together and offering encouragement and support to one another. They are beginning to explore discipleship. It started out as just a group gathered together, support and encouragement to one another. And they are now beginning to explore discipleship and move through those stages of a fresh expression. So that's one that started. We also have a group called 3 Mile Thursday that was started by our associate pastor, Kiona Bourne. And she has a passion for walking and exercise. And so she started a group that gathers on Thursdays for 3 Mile Thursday. They go for a walk, 3-mile walk, and they pray together. They're exploring discipleship together. We have another group. One of the things I've heard so much from folks here at Grace Church was, we've got to get younger. We've got to get younger. And so we've had some folks create another fresh expression called Faith Under 40. And this is a group of people 40 and younger that get together and movie nights together, play games together, eat together. They do studies together. They're in the midst of some discipleship, engaging in discipleship. So they're doing studies together. So that group is just kind of exploded, and we're really excited about what's happened there. We also had a group that failed miserably. We had an individual that we met at a Christmas, one of our Christmas events to our downtown neighborhood. We had an individual, person of peace, that came to us. She was a manager for an apartment complex that was just a few blocks from our church. They have over 100 children in this apartment complex. And so they invited us to come in, and I say it failed because we went in with a different mindset and a different idea of what we were hoping to accomplish there than the apartment complex. They were used to the goods and services being transferred from agencies and we weren't interested in that. We were there interested in building relationship and connection and in journeying what a fresh expression might look like there. And I say it failed. We learned a lot there. We learned so much in that experiment. So we're already in conversations with a couple of other apartment complexes here, having conversation about what it might look like to start a dinner church experience in the apartment complexes nearby. So that's what we learned out of the one that failed. We're learning on some different opportunities and ideas that may jump up out of that. So there's a few others here, but these are kind of what has happened here at Grace Church. And I know many of you came today looking for how do we do this fresh expression stuff? And I will say there are so many incredible fresh expression practitioners that are teaching and offering training through the Fresh Expressions program. I would encourage you to jump in with both feet and take as many people as you can, because there are some incredible people that Fresh Expressions US are putting out there and teaching. I know Ron has mentioned he's engaged in some of those. He may have some insight as well, but that's kind of our journey. That's where we have been. This church is being transformed in our whole missional identity and understanding our context because of our journey with Fresh Expressions. And I'm excited to see what God continues to do here. So Ed, I'll turn it back over to you if we want to have some questions, some answer. If some others want to share some insights maybe going on at your context, I would love to hear some of the Fresh Expressions going on at your place as well.
Thanks so much for sharing that, Brian. And one of the things that you said was early on you were looking for what you called, I think, pioneers.
Yeah.
Persons of peace. Do you want to share a little bit more what you mean by pioneers and persons of peace?
Yeah, absolutely. So these are individuals who we have been finding that God has been stirring in their heart. They just haven't known what to do with it. And so much of our ministry context has been, here, we'll fit you into children's ministry. That's where we have a need, or we have need in youth ministry. So if God's stirring in you, we'll connect you over here. And what we began to do as we tried to figure out what a person of peace or a pioneer pastor looked like in our context, we really just began to sit down with people who were asking us on what is this that's stirring in their heart. So for instance, Ginger Phillips was the individual that I shared with you about Rainbow of Life Ministry. She was an individual who was in our Faith Under 40 group, who was working in the accounting field. And she was, in her words, quite frankly, discouraged and frustrated at work. There was something stirring in her and she didn't know what it was. And so we just gathered around tables with her and prayed with her, had conversations with her and what was stirring. And she began to talk about this pain of loss and grief that was in her life. And she felt like God was calling her to do something with it. And so we just gave her an opportunity as a person of peace, someone that we trusted, and that we believed God was stirring, and we just poured into her. And so she has started this, she's left her accountant job as an accountant, and she is now part of our ministry team as an unpaid volunteer. And she has formulated this whole Rainbow of Life ministry. And it was just us sitting down with her and saying, what if God is leading you to this? What if God is calling you to make this journey? And she just started taking steps and exploring herself what God might be doing. So it's just finding people who have an interest to do something else that is maybe not a ministry that's already identified at our church. We've got a community of people here, endurance athletes, that just blow my mind. We've got folks that run in Ironmen and women events, triathletes here. And we've been having conversations with a couple individuals who are saying, is there something we can do with this community? And so we're already talking about creating a hiking church. They asked me to go run, and I said, there's not a chance I'm running. I am running with you guys. Not that I would love to be able to, I just can't. But I said, I'd love to go hiking or something like that. So we're having conversations now about what would it look like to gather a group of people to just go and hike together and begin to gather once a week and hike. We have great trails. It's one of the great gifts, I think, that we have here in Kokomo. We have these bike trails and walking trails. And so we're just going to use that asset and begin to gather people and go hiking together, and then explore together what it might mean to pray together and do discipleship together, but plan a trip together, maybe go somewhere and hike along the Appalachian Trail, or go and do some journey together. But all of that is bubbling out of these conversations with people who God is stirring. They just don't want to work in children's ministry. They don't want to work in youth ministry. They don't want to serve in some of the existing ministries that most of our churches already have. And we're just having conversation and saying, what if that passion of yours could turn into a ministry? So those are the people of peace. Those are the pioneer pastors, as we have identified them here at Grace Church. And we are just giving them the permission and the freedom to go and do and explore and experiment and see what happens.
That's great. Thank you. What questions do you have, or what do you want to ask Brian, share from your experience?
I'll start. Thank you so much. This is amazing to hear just the transformation that your church has gone through. I have a couple questions, and I think it's just like really one big question. So if I were to come to Grace Church on a Sunday morning, like how would I notice that it was different than, you know, a non fully engaged Fresh Expressions church? And then as people kind of embrace these passions and these ministries, and maybe stop doing the children's ministry or the youth ministry, how are those spots filled, for lack of a better word, because those are hard to fill anyway. And
Yeah, no. First part of the question, how would people, it might be hard for the outsider who's not been a part of Grace to come in and notice right away that Grace Church is transforming, because we still are very much supportive of the existing inherited church here. We're in no means trying to dismantle that. So when people walk in on a Sunday morning, they're still going to experience what has been a big part of this historical church. They're going to come in and experience 3 worship services. They're going to experience a high church, very traditional worship experience, along with an 8:15 service that gathers people in prayer and communion, and then an 11 o'clock service which gathers people in a contemporary setting. So there's going to be a lot of that people walk in the doors and they're going to experience. But while they're here, they may hear about the bike shop. They may hear about the coffee house. We've had a lot of people visiting who haven't stuck here or landed here on a permanent basis, but who have called back saying, hey, I heard about your bike shop when I was there. I have bikes that we would like to donate or get rid of. Can we do that, not being a member of the church? And we've had some folks come down and engage in the coffee house. So when you walk in on a Sunday morning, you're going to discover a church that is very much the inherited existing church. And we're intentional in keeping that, because not everybody here is interested in the Fresh Expressions. And so we were very intentional in finding those people who were passionate about it, that God was stirring, that God was leading to be our local missionaries, and we invested and poured into them and fanned that flame and turned them loose. But we also pour into those part of the existing church, and those who have been a part of this church for 50, 60 years and don't want to see a whole lot change in that. So we honor that as well. For those who feel a stirring, we just put it out there that we may have some ministry voids that come up in the existing inherited church, because people are being redirected in what we think is their call. And I would rather have a void in a children's ministry, a youth ministry, that is now a void for somebody who really wasn't passionate about being there anyway, than to have them just stuck there. And we're seeing great fruit in turning them loose to go out and to do some other stuff. So we're having to rethink what children's ministry looks like, what youth ministry looks like. This season that we are coming through with COVID-19 has helped us kind of think through that. We have been doing a Sunday morning children's ministry through Zoom. So it's been totally outside the building, and we're now having conversations about, does it have to be on Sunday? Can we do children's ministry with people who are also wanting to do fresh expressions? But can we free them up in a way that they can do children's ministry as it fits into their schedule? So Saturday may be the best day for some of our children's workers to engage in our children's ministry. So we want to be able to have that conversation and tweak all of our ministries and change those according to how God is stirring our folks. But yeah, we've had a couple people that have left some of our ministry, particularly children's ministry, and we've had to go to the congregation and say, this is a void. If it's a passion of yours, please let us know so we can get you connected. And if it's not a passion, that's okay. Just know that right now for the season, we're going to have a void until we can figure it out.
All right, thank you. Someone else have a question you want to ask? Yeah.
Barb and I were both kind of talking and wondering a little bit. Is the goal in Fresh Expressions to get those people, or eventually to get those people into traditional church, into the building, or does it kind of stay separate? And how do you grow and mature those people as disciples, I guess, if they're not getting into your building?
Yeah, that is one of the greatest questions when people are beginning to experiment and explore in fresh expressions, because most of our models have always been bring them back to the inherited existing church. And that's always been our goal. That's been the attractional model goal of, we've got this incredible building. We've got these amazing facilities. We want to get everybody to come here. And so if you ask some of the folks from Grace Church, is our goal of Fresh Expressions to get them back to church, you're going to find a handful. They're going to go, yes, our goal is to get them back here. But as you begin to explore in the teachings of Fresh Expressions, that is never the goal of starting Fresh Expressions, to get them to come back to the church. The whole idea of Fresh Expressions is to, again, take the church that God loves to the people that God loves. And the reality is, there's many of those people who are just not interested in coming back to the church, the inherited existing church. So that's part of the teaching, I think, that we all have to do in our ministry context, is giving our leadership and our ministry teams the permission to feel uncomfortable and wrestle with that idea that we're not doing these to bring everybody back to the church. And that's hard. That's hard work. Those are hard conversations. That's pain and grief for a lot of people. So one of the things we've discovered here, we have to get really good at grief care at Grace Church, because many of our Fresh Expressions bring grief to people, because these folks aren't always coming back to the church. And that's a new mindset for many of our people, particularly those who have been here for a long time.
Thank you.
So Brian, how then do you disciple the people if they're not coming to the church?
Yeah, so the goal of, as you walk through the process of Fresh Expressions, they do a great job of laying out the stages or the processing of Fresh Expressions. So we have several of our Fresh Expressions that are right now just in the listening stage. We're just gathering people and sitting around a table and having conversations. And I think that's in our culture today, when you start thinking of the different generations, part of the, I think, complaint of millennials, younger than millennials, it's always about evangelism with the church. It's always this idea, you got to get us saved and you got to get us into, and folks, if you do any reading with the nuns and duns, that group, that demographic that is really beginning to explode in our contexts, they're religious, but they're not interested in the church. And so they're interested in gathering around tables and spaces and having the religious conversations. They're just not interested in us evangelizing them and the models that we're used to using. So we, and it's hard, again, these are hard conversations, because the idea of fresh expressions is to take your time and building the relationships with the people. And our models have always been, let's hurry up and rush getting to the discipleship conversation, or getting to the discipleship piece, or getting to the church piece. And fresh expressions gives us permission to spend the time building the relationships and listening and having the conversations. And so as you journey through the fresh expressions trainings, you'll see the different stages. And I would just encourage you to take your time. Discipleship happens, but not every one of our fresh expressions right now are in that mode of discipleship. We've got some that we're just sitting around tables and having conversations about the brokenness of life, and how are they journeying through life. And as we build relationships with them, then we ask the question of, are you open to us sitting around a table and having some discipleship conversations, prayer together? And they come, and we're also discovering there's some fresh expressions that may never get to that point. And we're learning to be okay with that. We just go on to what may be the next fresh expression.
It's 3 o'clock, and so if some of you need to leave, that we understand, but we're willing to stay for another 30 minutes. Ed and Sherry, I hope you got the right time. I know you just joined. We are recording this, so you can watch it later, and we're also going to offer this next week and probably in July as well. So if you want to come back and hear the first hour, that would be great. So other questions that you have?
Yes,
What?
Beck.
I just want to know kind of what changes it between just a small group to a fresh expression. I have to apologize because I got the book and I haven't read it yet, so I'll be honest.
Yeah, I think there's going to be some similarities, in small group. But I think when we start talking small group, at least in my experience in the years of ministry, when we start talking small groups, our whole intention is gathering people around, and we want to immediately jump into the discipleship piece. And so when we start using the language of small groups, if we start talking that language here at Grace Church, that's the model that most of our people are going to go to. Oh yeah, we've done small groups before, and we've gathered around TV sets and we've watched videos together. We've studied, books together. We've done, and so I think that becomes our mindset when we start thinking about small groups. I think that's the model that many of our people begin to go to. A fresh expression, while starts out in many cases a small group of people, our purpose here at Grace Church when we start a fresh expression conversation, it's not to start it as a discipleship group. For instance, this hiking church conversation that we're having with folks right now, we're just having conversation about how cool would it be to gather some people together to go hiking, and in this passion of doing something that we all enjoy, How might God stir us to walk with each other in life? How might we be a support and encouragement to one another in this journey? And we just happen to be using hiking to do it. Now, as we gather together and build those relationships, the people that we have leading it will eventually get to the question of, hey, would you folks be open to, hey, praying together, or, exploring discipleship together? And there's ways to do that. You can invite people to come back. So say the hiking church, once they get started, as we approach that conversation, whenever it happens, it may be, we're not going to do it today, but would you be interested in coming back on a different night together and sharing a discipleship conversation? So there's a lot of different ways to do that, but the difference between the small group and the fresh expression, we're not rushing into the discipleship conversation, where I think the small group ministry, that's the whole basis of it, is to gather for discipleship. We're just doing life together in fresh expressions and seeing what develops out of it.
So, okay, let me just throw one at you. We did small interest groups rather than saying small groups, because we wanted people to be more, focused on a hobby or something they did together. And like they had a crafting group, and then they had a card making group, and then they eventually turned that card making group into half of the cards go to the church for shut-ins, and they are sent out. Now, does that and they have a devotional, and sometimes they have a song within that group, and they are a lot of people from outside of the church that go to other churches and neighborhood people. Did that then, because they did those pieces, did that transform it into a fresh expression? And we just didn't know it.
Yeah, no, I think there's some elements there. What I'm hearing the fresh expressions practitioners talk about when it becomes a fresh expressions is when it moves into the discipleship and becomes a church. And so along the way, we're exploring. So many of these that I shared with you, like our coffee house, we have it listed as one of our fresh expressions, but we haven't arrived at the discipleship or it actually becoming a church. And so practitioners in fresh expression wouldn't label it as a full-blown fresh expression yet, but we're journeying in that direction with our coffee house. We're going through the processing. So right now we're in the listening stage, which is one of the fresh expressions categories. We're just gathering around tables with that part of our community, and we're having conversations. We're also providing care there. So at the coffee house, it was a place where we were teaching about COVID-19 to a part of our community that had no idea COVID-19 even existed. It's also a place where we're connecting folks in need, some of our neighbors that are dealing with addictions and mental health challenges. That coffee house in this stage is also a place where goods and services and care is being shared. But it's in those places where we're also building relationship with our neighbors. And as you continue down those stages, you eventually come to the stage in a fresh expression where you explore discipleship and you become a church. And becoming a church is where we celebrate the sacraments. We're celebrating all of those things that you would experience in the inherited existing church. And when you get to that point, the fresh expressions practitioners are teaching that you then start over again and you start that process with another group in another way. So I would say there were elements, I'm hearing elements of fresh expressions in what you were talking about. But it becomes a full-blown fresh expression when we get to the discipleship and the church experience model. And we have many here in ours that we haven't arrived there yet. We're journeying that direction.
Brian, Kristen is asking what percentage of your church people are involved with Fresh Expressions? And then also, do your Fresh Expression leaders typically come, attend, participate in the inherited church to be encouraged and fed?
Yeah. We have a very small percentage. And I would say, I haven't put a pencil to it, but I would say probably 20-30% of our existing inherited church are engaged in Fresh Expressions. And so I think it's very similar to many of our church ministry models. You've got 20% of the people doing 80% of the work. And we've just shifted the work from what the church thinks they need, children's ministry, youth ministry, nursery, working in the kitchen, to freeing people up the 20-30% to go and do what God is really stirring in their heart. But of all of our practitioners of Fresh Expression, all of our people of peace and our pioneer pastors, all of them are engaged in our inherited existing church on a Sunday morning. They're all engaged in worship and connecting in other areas and other areas of ministry as well. But they're all reconnected back at the existing inherited church. I'm not necessarily sure that has to happen. I'm not saying it shouldn't or it should. I'm just saying our model here, they're all connected. It's where they all started. They were all part of our existing church, and we just started having conversations about what if God was calling us to do something different, and they all ran with it. And so, but there may be a day that we've got folks that are part of our Fresh Expressions that, they never show up inside the church building, and I think we would be okay with that as well.
I have one more quick question, if I can.
Yeah.
Since we're new to it at our church and haven't really done the trainings or read a lot yet, where would we go next? Should we just research through Fresh Expressions US website? Should we try to do a training with a few leaders, or what do you suggest?
I would suggest connecting with Ed Fenstermacher, and and church development has done a nice job of creating some spaces and opportunities here in the Indiana Conference. And Ed, I'll turn that over to you. You may have some ideas of what's coming, and so I'll let you jump on that.
Yeah, great question, Jessica. We have a website. If you go to the Indiana Conference website and go to the church development section, one of the options will be Fresh Expressions. And we've tried to maintain some resources that we're recommending and some other places that you can go on the internet that provide resources. We have some videos that are there where you can actually hear about other Fresh Expressions. We're offering some training. There's another one of these next week, and there'll probably be some a couple in July. But we're going to have what we call a Vision Day, which is 5 hours of training on September 26th, I believe it is. I'm looking here. It's the 26th in the North Central District. We're talking about maybe Noblesville being the location. That may actually be done virtually. Our last one was done virtually due to the virus, but that's an opportunity. And then Fresh Expressions US, if you go to their website, they have other training events happening around the country. There are dinner churches, which Brian mentioned, that model, which is one of the easier ways to get into Fresh Expressions. to have a dinner and but to have it focused on reaching people outside the church. And there's also a thing called Messy Church, and we're planning to do one of those later this fall, and the dinner church early next year. So we'll be offering some of those here in Indiana. Messy Church is sort of like Vacation Bible School, except it's typically done once a month by a church, and it's intergenerational, but it's very hands-on, very activity focused. So, so those are some of the things that I would say, but I would encourage you to start with the website. Next month in July, we're going to invite a group of people who we started a conversation with last month who are interested in networking. So if you'd like to see more of this, where you can actually share what you're doing and hear what other people are doing, we're going to have the opportunity to do that in July, and we can let you know when that's going to happen.
Okay. Great, so, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
We started our team. Our team started by going to a vision day, and I think the vision day we went to was down in Fishers or Noblesville. I think we gathered there, and I just gathered some people who were kind of being stirred and doing something different, and we landed at a vision day, a Fresh Expressions vision day here in the conference. And I'll just tell you, I don't know where your church is at. Did you say Plymouth, Jessica? I mean, even if you had to go to the border, the very bottom of the state, it's worth it. I would take a team and I would take the trip and I would go wherever you could find one here in the state of Indiana. Or even if you had to go to Ohio or Illinois, Michigan, I would take a team, because the practitioners that are there are phenomenal. I mean, they are just incredibly gifted men and women who have been doing this way longer than I have even thought about it. And so if you have a chance to discover a vision day, and you might find some of those either through the conference website or through the Fresh Expressions website, I'd sign up. I would go, and I wouldn't bat an eye about where it was at or how to get there. I would run.
We will. Thank you.
The other thing I just throw out, Jessica and Barb, is that if you needed someone to come and actually meet with some of your leadership to help, that we could probably figure out how to do that. So, because we really just want to try to do all that we can to help local churches to move this direction if God's leading them to. So, any other questions? This has been great.
I would love to hear from anyone else, any Fresh Expressions that each of you have going on, or if you have any going on. That's the thing I missed today, was just me sharing all my story. I love hearing what others have going on for Fresh Expressions. So I don't know if anyone wants to share that.
Yeah, I will. This is Ron and Scipio. This would be our 4th season of what we call the shelter, which would be modified dinner church. It has a from June to when it gets too cold, because it's an open air shelter, we did a weekly community meal. And from day one, Scipio on a good day has 60 people. Average attendance in year one was between 75 to 100 people. And only about 10 to 15 of those people were people that we would have cooking food. So it wasn't as if it was just Scipio United Methodist people coming. We essentially built a whole congregation that we've held for 3 years, just the combination of food and gospel music and message. So we always call it Thursday Night Live, music, meal, and message. And now, not everyone's going to build the structure that we did. We had help with grant money from Indiana Conference. But I was able to take that model into Vivi at the other church I pastor, and we rented a building for like $60 a night. And now in Vivi, we might be looking at 15 to 20 people. On the first night, we had over 60.
Wow.
And it declined a little bit. We had a real bad weather night. And then now the pandemic has hit, so I'm trying to figure out how to do these events virtually. So the shelter, perfectly named, we're probably going to call the virtual event Shelter in Place for a while and do those virtually. But we have created God has created, I should say, and we have just had a special thing happen at the shelter, and we're early going in the village of Dee, but God has blessed that in the beginning. And I would completely echo what Brian said. Vision Day, very key. We've spun off a few other smaller things at Scipio that haven't had time to come to fruition. But the Vision Day is very key. And intentional conversations with your leaders that they may not come into the church walls. Going into the 4th year, I'm getting ready to, when we can get back to church, we'll have our first member that came from the shelter that's becoming a member of Scipio United Methodist Church. So it does happen. But I've said from the beginning, every week where we have 75 to 100 people, that's a chance to minister, to speak God's word. So we don't get hung up now about where they come. We thank God for the opportunity to minister in those places. So
that's great.
That's what's going on here in Scipio and View.
That's great, Ron. Thanks. It's been exciting to see that happen. Wow. Anyone else? Well, we hope that this has been a helpful time. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, I guess I want guidance. We presently, our school system supplies food to the kids, lunches and breakfast and lunches. So we have people going on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday to pick them up. 40 for one apartment complex, 70 for another. And we deliver them. Because of the pandemic, we have limited the people to just picking up and delivering. What would be some options of turning that into a fresh expression? What ideas can you give us to maybe move that right into something different? We are going to be doing a reading program with them for certain age levels, but that's at a totally different time. This is between, they do a pickup within a 1 hour time frame.
Ed, Ron, anybody have a thought? I think if I were in that context, I would begin by having some conversations with people at the apartment complex, trying to find some people of peace in that context who are going to help you bridge the relationships with the folks into the apartment complex. Because that's what happened. That's what happened to us at the Apperson Way apartment. We had one individual who wanted us to come in and share in that, and where we didn't do a very good job was building the relationship with other people of peace in the apartment complex. So when we showed up, I think there was about 8 of us from Grace Church, and there was probably about 5 from the apartment complex, and they were all kids that the parents just sent down to us to babysit. And where we failed in that endeavor was we didn't spend enough time sitting around the table listening to the people of the apartment community. And so I think that's a great place for you to start. You're doing good work. I think there's great stuff happening there. And I know your church has deep desire to expand that. But I think one of the keys is building relationships with a few people, influential key people in the apartment complex. And
we have been doing that. We are already, there is a mutual mentoring going on between us, which has been, we give and receive. I mean, it's been a wonderful relationship, and she's identified, it's great because we didn't want to go in and do the program. We wanted her to tell us what the people needed in there. And so that's what we're doing. I mean, we have got that step. So now I got that step. Now, where do I take, I mean, is there a way to do, or should that just remain a food delivery service, and that's a great thing we do, and then we go into these other identified areas like reading program that could turn into a little mini church with kids. You know, I can see that happening.
Yeah, I think one of the things I'm having to learn is not to force. and that's a hard lesson for me to learn, because I'm ready to go, I'm ready to push, I'm ready. So allowing it to just be organic, you know, and it may be 2 years, it may be, you know, longer, of just providing food and, you know, doing those things that you're doing. And it's okay. I think just giving yourself permission that that's okay. But just let it be organic. I think you can push on them a little bit, but I think you have to push on them with the people there. And so, you know, if your next step is a desire, as you're praying over that and covering that in prayer, if your heart is being stirred in a way that, hey, maybe we could do a children's church program, I would run kind of that idea by the people of peace in the apartment complex and say, hey, this is kind of how our heart is stirring right now. What are your thoughts? What are you thinking about that? Do you think that was something that would be welcomed here? Do you, and then get them involved and engaged and helping with it. So it's not just you guys doing all that, all the work and all the ministry.
Right. Our goal is that we are a support system, but they have to identify a person that's actually going to run the program, and we will walk with them.
Yeah. Yeah. Good work.
I mean, they have set up an amazing system. It's a Christian-based owner, and they have started a new concept here, and it's a pilot program for community building. She's a community ambassador is her title.
Well, she is a person that I would connect with and that's your person of peace right there. And if she's got other avenues and other places to connect you, that's somebody that I would be putting on my list as a person of peace, and that I would be building a relationship with and finding out where else that individual can lead you.
Good. Yeah, I know of a fresh expression that is in a mobile home community, and the only thing I would add to what Brian has said is just I've watched that church that is doing this fresh expression in that place, how they just love on those kids. And I would just think about how can we just love on those children and those families. One of the things they do is every month they celebrate birthdays. And if you were born in that month, guess what? You get a cake, and the UMW of that church bakes the cake for the kids. And every week the UMW brings the milk for the meal. But they've just built relationships through sharing Christ's love in just tangible, consistent ways that have no strings really attached at all. And the other thing is, for this whole conversation, you know, we know this, we haven't stated it, but prayer is so key. I mean, in all of that, as you're working in relationship with that person of peace, you know, pray about that relationship. If you don't have a person of peace, pray that God would bring you that person. If you're in a church and people, you know, don't seem to be engaged with fresh expressions, but you feel it's on your heart and it's a direction you feel God is calling your church to go, pray that God would place one or two people, you know, that desire within them, and that you'd begin to see that. So prayer is just at the heart of all of this, because Brian, you've mentioned this many times, and it's got to be organically developed. It develops organically, and another way to say that is it's Holy Spirit led. You know, it's led through the movement of the Holy Spirit, and so to pray that we're open to that, we don't miss the opportunities that come our way. So, yeah. Yeah, and sometimes you may end up someplace else, as you said, Brian. You had some ideas, but what you ended up doing looked quite different. Yeah. Anything else? Brenda mentions in the chat that we do offer grants, and you can go to the website that I mentioned earlier, our Indiana Conference website, to church development, to our Fresh Expression page, and that will give you information about the grants. But we do offer grants up to $1,000 to help you launch your Fresh Expression. We do ask that you go to training, and that's why we try to offer training on a regular basis. And as I said, the next one is September 26th. So, and my guess is at this point, it's highly likely that will be offered virtually. So you won't have to drive. We've done that already before, so it can be done. In fact, I really thought it was well done when they did it virtually last month. So, all right.
Before everybody takes off,
Yeah.
I would love. I have been pushing on Ed a lot about my desire. This is personal here, about a personal desire to see some kind of a Fresh Expressions network created in the Indiana Conference.
Mm-hmm.
And if any of you would like to be a part of that, please let Ed or Brenda know so we can start gathering connections and names. And there's nothing in the works. There's nothing being formulated or created right now, but I'm going to keep pushing on church development and Ed. And if we can get enough people, I would love to connect. That's how I learn, is just connecting with other folks. And I would love to be a part of an Indiana Conference network of Fresh Expression practitioners, and just us getting together and see what happens.
That's great. That's a great way to end too. So thank you so much, Brian. Aren't we blessed to have someone with his heart and his experience and his willingness to share? I mean, we aren't paying him to do this. He is sharing this because he loves the church, wants to be of help to you, and appreciates the model, the Fresh Expression model. So thank you so much, Brian, for sharing. And as he said, just let us know. We've got your contact information, so we'll plan to let you know when we're going to do that networking next month sometime, and you're welcome to join us at that point. And it may be that we develop, we have to just think about this, but maybe we'll develop some ongoing, more formalized cohort groups, or groups where you're meeting with similar people, working on maybe similar projects on a regular basis. You could get together by Zoom, and we could try to help make that happen. So our prayers are with you. It'll be fun. Let us know what develops. And if you get stuck, let us know. We know a lot of other places that are doing things, so we might be able to hook you up with a church that is in a similar, doing a similar kind of ministry. So anyway, our blessings are with you, and we ask God's blessings, which of course are already with you, to go with you, and that you would just do beautiful things for Jesus and for the kingdom of God, and that his love would expand and grow and touch and transform many, many people in your communities. So go in Christ's peace. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.